In the silent vastness of a land that once belonged to the Roman Empire, archaeologists stumbled upon something unexpected: small metallic objects that, at first glance, seemed insignificant. But once cleaned and analyzed, they revealed themselves to be primitive whistles, some still bearing signs of wear from use. These items were unearthed during excavations in regions that once housed Romanized settlements, but not necessarily on battlefields or within military fortifications. That detail alone raised several questions among scholars. Why were they there? Who used them? And more importantly, were they instruments of war, tools for training, or just everyday objects? In fact, this discovery opened the door to a new interpretation of how communication may have functioned within the Roman legions. Historically, we know the Romans relied on instruments like the tuba, the cornu, and the bacina, large horns capable of producing loud, commanding sounds amid the chaos of battle. These were the official tools to initiate attacks, signal formations, or call for retreat. However, the presence of these smaller, handheld whistles introduced a fascinating theory. Was there a parallel communication system, more tactical, more discreet, not meant to command the entire army, but to deliver specific instructions within smaller units? More than a mere material finding, these whistles serve as an archaeological trigger, challenging what we thought we knew about Roman warfare strategies. They compel experts to reconsider just how sophisticated the legionary command system might have been. After all, Romans didn't just win battles. They choreographed them with almost mechanical discipline. Could a humble whistle be the missing piece in that puzzle? Now that we understand how this discovery sparked renewed debate among historians and archaeologists, let's dive into one of the main reasons this topic went viral: a powerful scene from a popular television series, in which a Roman centurion uses a whistle on the battlefield, a moment that fired up the public imagination and helped bring this theory into the spotlight. It was during one of the most intense moments of HBO's Rome series that this controversy gained new life in front of millions of viewers. Amid the deafening chaos of battle, the character Lucius Vorenus, a fearless, disciplined centurion deeply loyal to Rome's military traditions, lifts a whistle to his lips and blows a short, sharp command. Instantly, the soldiers around him respond with precision, realigning their formation as if each man knew exactly what that sound meant. There's no shouting, no confusion, just the sound of the whistle cutting through dust, blood, and fear, bringing order to chaos. This scene, cinematically powerful, was crafted to showcase the absolute control centurions held over their troops. But in doing so, it also planted a lasting question in the minds of viewers. Was this detail, the use of a whistle as a command tool, historically accurate? Or was it merely a creative decision by the screenwriters? The truth is, while Rome was praised for its commitment to capturing the atmosphere and customs of the era, many elements were adapted for storytelling clarity and visual impact. After all, translating the full complexity of a Roman legion's communication system, with its dozens of gestures, signals, and formation codes, into a scene that modern audiences can grasp in seconds requires some simplification and sometimes artistic liberty. Still, the impact of that single image was so strong that it shaped public perception. Many began to believe that the whistle truly was part of Rome's military arsenal. And that's the fascinating part. When fiction is presented so convincingly, it begins to shape how we perceive reality. So, when ancient whistles were discovered in archaeological sites, many people instantly connected them to the Rome series. It felt like fiction had predicted fact. But does that connection hold up under historical scrutiny? What do the classical sources actually say about how commands were transmitted in Roman legions? To understand whether whistles truly had a role in Roman military communication, we need to dive into the classical sources, the ancient texts that survived time and offer detailed accounts of the machinery behind one of the most effective armies in history. Historians like Tacitus, Polybius, Vegetius, and even Julius Caesar, in his reports on the Gallic Wars and the Civil War, documented with great care the structure, rituals, and command systems of the Roman legions. Yet, in all of these texts, there is no direct mention of whistles being used in battle. Instead, commands were transmitted primarily through powerful sound instruments like the tuba, a long straight trumpet, the cornu, a curved horn, and the bacina, a deep-sounding circular trumpet. These instruments had specific purposes: to signal the start of a march, to call formations into place, to announce retreat, or to coordinate attacks. Their sounds were loud enough to cut through the deafening roar of clashing shields, flying spears, and men shouting to survive. In addition to sound, visual signals played a vital role. Roman legions used military standards, the most iconic being the signum, carried by a designated soldier known as the signifer. These standards served as focal points for the unit's position and movement. When a standard advanced, the troops knew to follow. When it stopped or shifted, it indicated a tactical change. The combination of auditory and visual commands created a communication system that was both redundant and highly effective. So while the Roman military communication system was complex and meticulously organized, it was also formal and standardized. The use of a small individual whistle is never recorded in any official capacity, much less as part of battlefield strategy. That absence is meaningful, especially in an army where every detail was codified, drilled, and repeated relentlessly. But this doesn't mean whistles didn't exist, only that they may not have held enough strategic value to be formally documented. And in an empire where so much training, discipline, and military culture happened far from the pen of historians, there may have been many tools used quietly behind the scenes. And it's in those behind-the-scenes moments, in training grounds, practice fields, and day-to-day drills, that the true potential use of these mysterious whistles begins to emerge. Far from the battlefield's chaos and the glory of Rome's triumphal marches, the daily life of a legionary was built on discipline, repetition, and unwavering obedience. It was in the training grounds, the campus, that Roman soldiers forged their physical endurance and mental resilience. And it's precisely in this more controlled environment, away from the noise and confusion of war, where the use of whistles begins to make real sense. Picture a Roman military instructor standing before a group of 30 raw recruits under the scorching sun of Hispania. He needs every man to move in unison, to march, to pivot, to strike, like a living machine. A whistle, in this context, becomes an invaluable tool, small, sharp, and piercing enough to command attention. With a single blow, he can issue a clear and immediate instruction: stop, advance, turn, attack, regroup. It's efficient, direct, and ideal for synchronizing repetitive drills. This theory is further supported by the fact that the whistles found in archaeological digs were not located within permanent military sites like legionary fortresses or battlefields. Instead, they were unearthed in more peripheral or civilian contexts: rural settlements, Romanized towns, or small garrison outposts. This strongly suggests their use in non-combat scenarios, such as training, hunting expeditions, or public activities involving coordination and crowd control. And we must remember, the Romans were nothing if not practical. If a tool was useful, it was used, even if not officially documented. Much of what we know about Roman training comes from manuals and commentary, but there's still a vast ocean of everyday practice that was never written down. It's entirely plausible that whistles were employed by drill instructors, city guards, or sports coordinators during athletic games or ceremonial events. This is the gray zone of Roman history, the intersection between what was recorded for posterity and what was lived but left undocumented. And in that space, a whistle may not have led men into war, but it may well have taught them how to survive it. And that's precisely why this topic has stirred such excitement, not just among historians, but among curious minds everywhere. Because the real power of history often lies not in what is certain, but in what is possible. There's something deeply human about the desire to fill the gaps in history with fascinating possibilities. And it's precisely this tension between what is documented and what is merely suggested that turns a small, seemingly mundane object, like a whistle, into a provocative symbol. The mere possibility that Romans might have used whistles, even if not in the heart of battle, but in the margins of training and daily routine, is enough to spark debates, inspire viral videos, and reignite a collective fascination with an empire we thought we already understood. Among scholars, the topic is divisive. On one side stand the traditionalists, who demand direct evidence and dismiss any theory not grounded in primary sources. On the other side, a more interpretive school embraces the idea that much of ancient history has been lost, and that it's valid, even necessary, to infer practices from patterns, archaeological context, and indirect clues. The discovery of Roman-era whistles may not prove anything definitive, but it cannot be ignored either. Their existence alone, especially in certain contexts, is enough to raise important and previously overlooked questions. And this is where the real power of the topic lies, not in offering a final answer, but in provoking thought. The possibility that Romans used whistles, even informally, challenges our stagnant assumptions and reminds us that history is not a fixed narrative. It's a living, evolving investigation. It tells us that even in the most disciplined army of the ancient world, there may have been space for improvisation, adaptation, and silent tools whose echoes have long since faded. This is why topics like this go viral. They tap into the imagination, blending fiction and fact, archaeology and curiosity, authority and wonder. And this is exactly where your channel has the greatest opportunity, not just to teach what's already known, but to explore what might have been, to dive into those forgotten details, those overlooked relics, those speculative truths that make history breathe again. The whistle may never have sounded across a Roman battlefield. And now I ask you, could a simple whistle change everything we know about Roman military discipline? If discoveries like this make you see history through a new lens, then you're in the right place. Here on this channel, we uncover secrets, bust myths, and give voice to the details that history books left behind, every single week. If you want to keep exploring with me, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the past is full of stories that are still waiting to be heard. And who knows, the next discovery might be even more surprising.